We are the Childhood Collective, and we have helped thousands of overwhelmed parents find joy and confidence in raising their child with ADHD. I'm Katie, a speech language pathologist.
And I'm Lori.
And I'm Mallory, and we're both child psychologists. We combine the science of ADHD with the compassion of moms and bring you practical tools you can start using today.
So hit subscribe and let's help your family shine with ADHD.
Hey there, just a quick important note about today's episode. Mallory and I had the opportunity to interview Peter Shankman, a 5-time best-selling author who recently wrote a children's book about ADHD. Peter's story is incredibly inspiring, and we think that you will love hearing about the journey that led him to writing this book. It is really important to us that Peter be able to show up authentically in this episode. And that means that some of the topics and language are geared more towards adults. So if your kids are nearby, go ahead and grab some headphones because this particular episode is not meant for young ears. That being said, we believe that Peter's message will resonate with many of you, and we are so excited to share.
Today, we are delighted to have Peter Shankman, a 5-time best-selling author, entrepreneur, and corporate keynote speaker, joining us on the podcast. Peter is the founder of Help a Reporter Out, a way for journalists to connect with sources. He is the host of the podcast Faster Than Normal, where he helps people realize that having a neurodiverse brain can be a gift. And he is the creator of the Shank Minds Breakthrough Network, which is an elite online mastermind of thought leaders, business experts, and change makers.
And Peter is a father, a 2-time Ironman triathlete, a Class B licensed skydiver, which we might need to talk about, and he has a pretty serious Peloton addiction. When he's not traveling around the world, speaking to companies big and small, he's based in New York City with his 9-year-old daughter and his 2-year-old dog, both of whom consistently refuse him access to his couch. So thank you so much for joining us today, Peter.
My pleasure. Great to be here.
So we are super excited to have you on, and we wanted to start off, tell us a little bit about yourself and what is your connection to the world of ADHD? Because our podcast is families raising kids with ADHD. A lot of the parents here themselves have ADHD. What's your connection?
So I wasn't diagnosed until my mid-30s. When I was a kid, I had what was called, in the New York City public school system, I had what was called sit down, you're disrupting the class disease. And school sucked. I was miserable. Mm-hmm. I was fortunate that in high school, I got into high school performing arts and went there. And singing and acting saved me, but did not do well academically. Managed to get into Boston University, got through BU with the skin of my teeth. Had one job in my life. I worked for America Online for 3 years. You guys don't look old enough to remember America Online, but...
Oh, no, I do.
We remember the dial-up situation. Absolutely. We were just talking yesterday to someone about how it was like so annoying when someone would pick up the phone and you'd get disconnected. Yeah.
I give these speeches and I say, if anyone's under 35, you're not going to understand what I'm saying, but I was hanging out in something called the chat room, and the Melrose Place TV gossip chat room, if I remember correctly.
Oh my gosh, that was the place to be.
So I wasn't diagnosed till age 35, and then all of a sudden, all my craziness and all my mishigas made sense. I made sense why I, could start and sell 3 companies, each one in under 3 years, but I couldn't remember to take out the trash. Why I was the person you wanted in an emergency, because I would always be there and I'd have the situation totally under control, but couldn't be present for dinner. Was doing a million things. So everything started to make sense. And so after I sold my 3rd company, I had some downtime and I started researching. I started researching why I was the way that I was. And I'd just gotten diagnosed. So I said, okay, let's try to figure out what good stuff comes from this. And what do I, without spending 35, 40 years not knowing that you're ADHD, what was I doing? What did I just create? What did I do to get myself through the day, right? How did I survive? Mm-hmm. And I realized that all these systems I'd set up, all these things I'd set up in my life, I was doing without even thinking about it. For years, I don't remember when I didn't have this. I have two sides to my closet, and they're literally labeled. They say office/travel, and it's t-shirt and jeans. And the other side says speaking/TV, and it's button-down shirt, jacket, and jeans. That's it. My suits, my vests, my sweaters, those are all in my daughter's closet. So when I wake up every day, I wonder what I should wear. Oh my God, that sweater. I remember that sweater. Laurie gave me that sweater. God, I wonder how she's doing. I should look her up. It's 3 hours later. I'm naked in the living room on Facebook and I haven't left the house. So, it's one of those things where I realized that all the things that I was doing were because of, not in spite of, my ADHD. All my success was because of, not in spite of, my ADHD. And most of the things that have, given me grief in my life were because of, not in spite of, my ADHD. So for me, I realized I did what anyone with ADHD does, and I turned it into a best-selling book. I did all this research, and I got on an airplane. I flew to Tokyo, wrote chapters 1 through 5 on the plane out. Went to the lounge, had a cup of coffee and a piece of sushi, took a shower, got back on the same plane, same seat. 2 hours later, wrote chapters 6 through 10 on the flight home.
Okay.
Had absolutely no reason to go to Tokyo other than to write a book. So that's sort of how I live my life. And people think it's crazy, and it probably is, but it works. And so my connection, I guess the best way to put it, my connection to ADD is really the fact that I love how my brain works. And I am trying to explain to the rest of the world, especially to kids, that it's a gift. It's not a curse. You have all these kids who are being told they're broken.
Yeah.
Are being told they're different and that's wrong. And as someone who was told that by every single teacher for 18 years, I can tell you that if you get told that the first 18 years of your life, you're going to spend the next 40 trying to come out of it.
Definitely.
I have been in therapy since I think I was 15 years old. And it gets to the point where at the end of the day, if we can prevent kids from being told that, and rather tell kids that they're brilliant, not broken, we can save, we don't have to undo everything that will otherwise be in their heads. I mean, I gave a speech yesterday to Morgan Stanley, 200 people in the audience, and then about 18,000 on satellite all around the world. And got an email yesterday with some of the comments and things of his, and they were off the charts amazing. And like everyone, like the person who hired me brought me in, and I was talking about neurodiversity, and the person who brought me in said that I got a net promoter score of 80 out of 100. The closest speaker who ever got close to 80 was like 4 years ago, someone who had a 55.
Wow.
And I ran an 80. And so there's a part of me that's like, my God, that's awesome. I did really well. And there's another part of me that, God, I guess I got really lucky there. They must have never heard a speaker before or never heard English. They didn't speak English. And they just thought I would look good. Because that's how your brain works. Yep. When you're told you're broken all your life, you just assume that any success you've had is luck.
I think you're speaking to an experience that a lot of our listeners have had. A lot of our listeners are getting diagnoses for themselves in adulthood,
yep.
A lot of times sparked by their child's.
Right. They're taking the fastest growing segment of people being diagnosed with ADHD are parents.
Yes. And so their child's diagnosis is sparking their own diagnosis, and they're wanting to parent their kids differently, and they're not wanting to leave their kids in the dark and leave their kids to kind of fill in the blanks about why their brain works the way it does, kind of like how when they grow up, and what you're saying your experience was like is you live your whole life thinking you're broken. And so these parents that are getting these diagnoses now don't want that same experience for their kids, which we agree. We think that we're at this really pivotal point where we can really help, like you're saying, kids at a young age learn that their brain is amazing and that this is going to be the reason for some of their greatest strengths.
I am being invited now more than ever before to speak to corporations about neurodiversity in the workplace. And that makes me so happy, not only because I love speaking, but because we're finally at the point where this mental health as a whole is being taken seriously, and these conversations are happening. Companies, I saw a study that said companies are spending 65 65% of companies are spending more this year on mental health than they ever have before.
Wow.
Employment health. And that is just such a great number.
That is.
Saw another amazing study by the Rand Corporation that was done for the federal government that said if we want our military and our intelligence gathering agencies in this country to continue performing on top of their game, then they need to start hiring a neurodiverse workforce.
Mm-hmm.
And that, I mean, this is the Rand Corporation, right? You know, they're the ones who put microchips in all our heads. You know, they don't mess around. And so for them to come out and say, hey, this is important, praise the Lord, we're finally having these conversations.
Absolutely. I think that's so important. And the reason for that, right, is that neurodiverse brains can think about things in a totally different way. And I love the example you gave of being the person everybody wants in an emergency, because that just kind of like summarizes, I think, the ADHD strengths and that kind of ability under pressure to just see multiple options and evaluate. And I think that's really cool to hear. I'm not familiar with that particular study, but that's so cool. And it makes sense to me, like, why they would be saying that, because we don't want everyone thinking inside the box, right? We need to get out of that box and see it a different way. It's very cool.
Well, and that's the key. I mean, you don't want to surround yourself with boring people or with people who think the same way you do.
Yep.
Nothing grows there, right? And you know, I'm getting calls to speak to companies about this stuff because they understand that I think differently.
Yeah.
And you know, it's nice to see that happening in corporate America, because corporate America is not, everyone says they're progressive, but it's truly amazing how many companies in corporate America are afraid of change.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And so the fact that they are starting to do something about it, the pandemic actually helped. It sounds crazy, but the pandemic actually helped. It pushed us forward by about 20 years because we let people work from home, mm-hmm. and productivity didn't go down. What was a great Simpsons episode? I don't remember what they were worried about. Homer's worried about something, and he goes, but this is what's going to happen, and everything's going to go bad, and dogs and cats are going to eat each other, and you know, and so I always use that line. It's like we worked from home for 2 years, and dogs and cats didn't eat each other.
So there you go.
Right, we survived. So that, you know, to a neurodiverse person, all of a sudden they're at home and they're getting incredible work done.
Yep.
Right, stuff that they've never been able to do before, and so that to me is phenomenal, because we proved that it can work. We proved the experience can work. And so it's fun to I don't want to say gloat, but it is nice to see these, that stuff I've been shouting from the rooftops is finally being taken seriously.
So I know that you've written your children's book, The Boy with the Faster Brain. And in that book, I just love how you use different analogies. You walk through kind of like some of the science, right, of the actual chemicals in our brain in a way that's really kid friendly, and a lot of those basics. But the piece that really stuck out to me is the way that you got at the emotional experiences of kids who have ADHD, and in your case, not knowing what was going on, right? But that there's just a lot of ups and downs and a lot of big feelings that come with that. And then going through the diagnostic process. And I don't know, I want to commend you on your book, because I recently read it, and I think it's really a special piece. And I think it's so important. Like, we've for a long time said, like, gosh, we really need a children's book that can explain ADHD in a really safe way and also get at those emotions. So that's very awesome. And I'm curious, when you were writing that book, tell us more about kind of what you want readers to get out of it. What's your main goal?
So out of The Boy with the Faster Brain, it's very simple. I want them to understand that being gifted with this faster brain is actually a gift. It's not a curse. They are brilliant, not broken, and they have the ability to do anything they want at a faster rate. All they have to do is learn how to drive their faster brain. I equate it to if you've driven a Honda Accord the past 10 years, nice car, very safe. It's a car. You know, you have to floor it to get to highway speed, right? When you get on the highway. If you come out one day and someone's gifted you a Lamborghini and you try to drive it the same way you've driven the Honda Accord, you're not going to last very long. You're going to floor it to get on the highway, and you're going to be 4 miles up ahead, and you're going to crash into a tree. So you have to learn how to drive your faster brain. You have a faster brain that doesn't always have the greatest brakes. So you have to prepare for that in advance. You have to understand, hey, there's a turn coming up half a mile ahead. At the speed we're going to be there in 4 seconds. Start preparing for that turn.
Right.
take your foot off the gas for a second. And that's so true in so many ways, that the premise of, just saying stuff without thinking.
Yes.
I mean, that was my biggest problem growing up. I had the social acuity of a turnip, and I did not know how to uh, shut up. And also, when you're told you're broken, you tend to want to force people to realize you're not, and so you do that in a very overreaching, over demanding way. I had an ex girlfriend who I'm still very close friends with. We do work together now, and she's a psychologist. But I remember we met up a couple of years ago. We had dinner. And we broke up like back in '05. Um, and she said to me, what'd she say? She said, the problem in our relationship, Peter, she goes, she wasn't perfect. She goes, but the problem was I always felt like it was the Peter Shankman show. It was never the Peter and Jennifer show. It was always the Peter Shankman show, because it didn't matter what I was doing, whatever, you had to come in and you had to immediately tell your story. Here's what happened. Here's my day. Da, 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 da. And she was 100% right. I didn't understand yet
Mm-hmm.
how to slow down my brain. Now, with my daughter, I when I pick her up at school, whatever, she's gonna be 10 next week. When I pick her up at school, I take a few deep breaths before I walk in. Right? Let me be in the moment. Let me listen to her. She's gonna want to talk about her day. So it's that premise of let me understand how to better work my brain, so that everyone else around me has a pleasurable experience with me.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And I know that's so true for so many of our kids, and some of us in the Childhood Collective are ADHD parents. And you see that, when your child just really wants to be in the mix and with their friends and that kind of thing. But there is that impulsivity, or kind of just like acting without thinking, that comes, and then immediately like, oops, I know that was not what I wanted to do. And it's hard to watch that as a parent. I think that's really the way that you are able to put it into words is really powerful, for parents to hear and understand, kind of like what their own child might be going through. And in a lot of cases, what they themselves have probably experienced too, so I love that you're able to put that into words. But that social piece is really challenging, for a lot of kids with ADHD. And it's not, I don't think people think of it, right? Like they think of like ADHD and, oh, the little boy that runs around the classroom and can't sit still. And that's a part of it, in a lot of cases. But there is that social piece that isn't always easily recognized unless you're sort of experiencing it yourself.
And it's interesting. I watch my daughter, and I'm pretty sure she has ADHD. I don't think there's any question about it. But she watches me. She loves the book. She's read it countless times. She had me come in and read it to her class. And what's really cool about it is that she is whether she has or not, she's learning that any form of neurodiversity is a gift, and she's learning to look for these things, in people, and to sort of look for the best in people. And at 10 years old, teasing has started, in her school, everywhere. It's not just her school. Like, 10 years old is about that time. And it's really interesting to watch her, because the way I've talked about this as a sort of having a different brain is a good thing. I like to think that she is growing up with the mentality that different is good. Right? One of the first things I ever taught her, I remember she came home like in 2 years ago, so probably like second grade. A boy had called her weird, and she was all upset. And I go, "What do you mean? That's awesome." She goes, "Why is it awesome?" I said, "Honey, weird is a side effect of awesome." So what he was saying is, you're awesome, and that's like her line now. Weird is a side effect of awesome. So normal is boring, and weird is a side effect of awesome. So I think we need to have that conversation with more kids, whether they're neurodiverse or not. Um, I've been going on the news a lot about this. I believe that this is what we have to do, and we have to have this conversation, and we have to have these discussions, because life is way too short, to go around not wanting to learn from everyone you meet. Everyone you meet knows something you don't.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like neurodiversity has been something that's interwoven in all of your conversations with your daughter. But let's say a family, you know, didn't understand this perspective before. They're just learning about it, and their child has a new diagnosis of ADHD. So neurodiversity hasn't been interwoven throughout their conversations, but now they want to sit down and have this conversation. with their child. What advice would you give to parents when they're first kind of embarking on this type of conversation?
Understand that everyone is different. Whether you're ADHD, whether you have a normal brain, whether you're neurotypical, atypical, um, everyone has differences, and differences are what make life interesting. If I were talking to my kid about it, I'd say your difference is that your brain goes a little faster than normal. And that's going to be really cool because you can do a lot of great things and help a lot of people. And a lot of things that other people have problems with will come much, much easier for you. And so I would start there and frame it as a positive. And I'd say, like everything else, being able to do cool stuff comes with responsibilities. And one of those responsibilities is to make sure you understand how your brain works and the different types of things your brain can do and the pitfalls that come along the way. I think that I see it in my daughter already. I see her hyper focus. She loves play. She makes slime. She learned how to make slime during the pandemic, and I rue the day she learned how to make slime.
I have the same problem at my house too, by the way. Slime is the
I
worst.
never have any conditioner in the house, and she makes slime. But I see her hyper focused. She'll make 14 different types of slime in 3 hours and never once look up. And I know that. That action. I do that. And because of that, I understand that there have been some studies that say that that's a precursor to an addictive personality. And I completely get that as well. I very rarely drink because I don't have one drink. We used to order pizza when she was younger. I'm a single dad. And so once in a while, I'd order pizza. And we would order a pie with 8 slices. She'd have 2 slices. I'd have 6. And leftover pizza is not a thing in my world. I don't understand people who take the pizza and put it in the refrigerator and have it later. I've never had pizza in my fridge. If there's pizza in the house, I'm eating it. And so I've had to learn not to do that. I take the pizza. Instead of that, we go to the pizza place and we sit down and we have a couple of slices and then we go home. I remember I was in an office. I used to rent an office space pre-COVID, and the person in the office next door to me, I guess they had a party the night before in the office, and the woman came in next afternoon, stopped by my office. She goes, "Hey, we have some leftover beer. You want a beer?" I'm like, "What is it? We have leftover wine. What is leftover wine? How is that a thing?" And it was really, I don't get that. So, I joke, but it's very, it's ingrained in truth. I only have 2 speeds, right? And when you're ADHD or when you're any sort of neurodiverse, you're very, very much about that. And that's something else I would tell my daughter or have parents talk to their kids about, is that, they moderation isn't really a thing for people like this. And so we need to be aware. I have a rule, I call it playing the tape forward. Before I make a questionable life choice, I ask myself, how am I going to feel about this life choice in 12 hours? Let's play the tape forward 12 hours in the future. How am I feeling? Right? Am I going to regret spending this much money on something I probably don't need? Am I going to, whatever the case is. And I that has saved me many a time, right?
Yes.
How am I going to feel in the morning? And so I think at the end of the day, you can tell kids that their brain is an incredible tool. It is a very, very powerful power tool, with which they can build anything. But the world's best builders all go for training to learn how to use those tools. And that's what you have to do with your faster brain.
I love everything you just said. I think that I'm just going to okay, so when we do a pull-out quote for the podcast, that's just going to be like a 13-minute quote. But I think, there's so many good things in there. But the part that really stands out to me is the balance in your perspective. And that is, yes, there's so many good and amazing and beautiful things about having a unique brain and having ADHD. And I think that is something that in the past was not emphasized enough. And I think it's amazing to bring that to the forefront. And it's an and statement, right? That means that there's work to be done. And we have to know ourselves and know our limits and practice playing the tape forward. I can tell you that is so challenging to teach to kids. And I love that analogy and just kind of the visual of like, play it forward 12 hours. What's that going to look like? And I think that's a pretty good time frame, probably for a 10-year-old, right? Like anything longer than that is just too far of a tape. But I love the balance in what you share, because I think when we only focus on negatives, that's incredibly draining. And when we only talk about the positives, we're almost missing kind of the balanced approach. Like we need both, and they exist together. And I think that is, I don't know, it's really cool. And I just really appreciate your wisdom that you're sharing with that. So hopefully that's something that parents can, take and use. And I know that we have a lot of listeners as they're tuning in today, they're probably just meeting you for the first time. So can you tell our listeners how they can find you and where to get your book and a little bit more about just kind of where you're at in the world?
Sure. My entire life is available at shankman.com. The Boy with the Faster Brain is available pretty much anywhere. Amazon, Barnes & Noble, anywhere you buy books. You can find it. My email is peter@shankman.com. And and I'm at Peter Shankman on all the socials. If you're going to follow me anywhere, I'd probably suggest Instagram. I personally currently hate Twitter, which is such a bummer because I used to love it. So I strongly recommend Instagram more than anywhere else. But yeah, I'm always happy to talk about this stuff. And reach out. Feel free.
Thank you so much, Peter. And we'll be sure to link all those links and your socials in the show notes. But we just really appreciate you being here, taking the time to share your experience, offer some encouragement to families. Thanks for being here today.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Shining with ADHD by your hosts, Lori, Katie, and Mallory of the Childhood Collective. If you enjoyed this episode, please like this video and hit subscribe so you can be the first to know when a new episode airs.
If you are looking for links and resources mentioned in this episode, you can always find those in the show notes. See you next time.